And all right, let me see this piece. Sinners is a smash, so why is Hollywood putting an asterisk on its success? Well, I feel like we all know why. Sinners has done more than ignite interest in the days since its April 18th release. The film has become a massive box office achievement, one worthy of Coogler's own success story. Stellar reviews and consistent word-of-mouth praise have sold out screenings days in advance. And the conversation surrounding the movie itself is on the tip of everyone's tongue. Yes, never underestimate good reviews and consistent word-of-mouth praise. How many of you will go see a movie because someone, especially that you trust, or like enough people online are going, oh my God, you gotta watch it. You gotta watch the movie. And that is organic marketing, which is why you will have films that spend a shit ton of money on marketing, but if it's not good, not gonna necessarily translate to butts and seats. And that was a problem with Snow White. Not enough people were excited for that movie. Early reviews were like, Gal Gadot, enough said. And then, early screenings, people who were watching the film right when it came out, thumbs down, and nobody wanted to go see that movie. Gal-El, no. Wait. Hold on. Look at this tweet. This is about the announcement of Gal Gadot playing, being in a World War II film. Hitler, no. Hitler, no. Release the prisoners. Hitler, no. It's got to be even more dead sounding than that. Okay, so Sinners is exactly the kind of dialogue starter that Coogler hoped for on the eve of his first film debut, an entirely original movie that's put butts in seats, shattered records in an age of never-ending remakes and reboots. By all metrics, Sinners is an industry-shaking triumph. So why are all the entertainment industry trades putting an asterisk on its success? At the end of the film's opening weekend, which earned it an incredible $61 million worldwide, Variety's box office summary concluded, "It's a great result for an original R-rated horror film. Yet the Warner Brothers release has a $90 million price tag before global marketing expenses, so profitability remains a ways away." Yeah, this was opening weekend when it destroyed. Like, it shattered expectations. Other responses, like the ones from the New York Times and Business Insider, had a similarly demeaning slant. While box office numbers were once considered industry jargon, the growth of social media and expanding brands like Variety, Hollywood Reporter, and Deadline into go-to publications for cinephiles and everyday readers alike means that reports like the ones put out for Sinners have the potential to impact a film's success. Though Sinners is far from the determined indie film that Fruitvale Station was, the trades are responding to his latest as though the opening weekend is a make or break moment for the film. That narrative is just the latest in an unnerving trend. It's also acting as if a film makes all of its money back in opening weekend, which no, it does not. That's why it's called a trajectory, where they can determine how well a film is going to do based on the opening weekend. So based on the opening weekend of Snow White, they knew it was going to be a disaster because it was a disaster opening weekend, which meant the trajectory of it was going to keep it on that disaster line. This direct and seemingly willful dissent from the larger cultural consensus only helps to keep power in the hands of those who already have it. That's what we call gatekeeping. Just last week, I wrote about a rarity in the current movie market, a remake of The Wedding Banquet that brought interesting new ideas and resonance to a familiar story. But the likelihood of a remake, reboot, or sequel with any lingering value is slim. Moviegoers, especially ones who don't live in major metropolitan areas, have little originality to choose from at the theater, which is why Sinners felt even more like a godsend from the cinema heavens. The film is conceived entirely by Coogler. It's not an adaptation of any kind or yanked from a true story, and not a sequel to any existing film. What's more, it's a biting piece of blockbuster horror co-produced and distributed by a major Hollywood studio. It may feel bleak, but Sinners was a leap of faith for Warner Brothers that paid off immensely. To put the achievement into perspective, Warner Brothers has only co-produced and distributed an entirely original, non-biographical film that wasn't a sequel to an existing property or simultaneously plopped onto streaming 3 times in the last 5 years. My God. Of the 3, which include Clint Eastwood's Juror Number 2, Christopher Nolan's Tenet, Coogler's film is the only one written and directed by a black filmmaker. In the dearth of ceaseless sequel-itis, that is major, and audiences took note. Viewers are as amped about the film being an original piece of work as they are about the movie itself. Yes, I think this is a really important point to understand. When people who maybe you didn't love the film that much are like, why is this film, why is there so much hype around it? Because people are starved for completely original films that don't suck ass, okay? Because even if you didn't like Sinners, I think you would not say that it sucked ass. And so there is a ton of excitement because a lot of people did love the film, but also because it's a completely original piece of work and we are in a desert. It feels so rare. People are starved, and that's why it's like, thank you. Thank you. Praz Mukow, thank you for the 5 months. Saw Sinners in a theater, incredible experience. After such a successful opening weekend, it's no major surprise that the excerpt from the Variety write-up was received like a buzzkill showing up to a rager in progress. Yeah. The post drew the ire of social media users and even an industry titan like Ben Stiller, whose criticism of Variety's framing stunted the number of likes on the publication's original post. But Variety wasn't alone in their pointedly worded coverage. The New York Times said the numbers included a big asterisk and a piece of work that doesn't hint a sequel. Right. Meanwhile, the contents of both the Times and Variety's pieces admitted that Sinners is on track to recoup its $90 million price tag and then some. Oh, yeah. They so begrudgingly had to admit. They're like, oh, okay, yeah, I guess fine. All right. If you look at the numbers. And besides that, a $61 million opening for an entirely original horror film boasting an R rating is unheard of, especially in 2025. So why frame these responses as a raised eyebrow instead of a celebration over the state of cinema? That's where things become both intriguing and alarming. In an enlightening guest post for the newsletter Contraband Camp, critic Brooke Obie states that the reaction is just another instance of Hollywood changing the standards of success for black cinema. White media has always conspired to spin the narrative and move the goalposts about black films, black filmmakers, and their successes, Obie writes. She also references another unique element of the Sinners story, a deal carved out by Coogler that will allow him to own the rights to the movie after 25 years, an extremely unconventional industry practice. Remember, who owns the trade magazines? We have talked about this repeatedly. Does anyone know the answer? Anybody? Penske Media Corporation. Penske Media Corporation that has done a ton of consolidation. They now own more than 20 digital and print brands, including Variety, Rolling Stone, Deadline, The Hollywood Reporter, Billboard, etc., which is essentially owning all of the major media publications in entertainment. Jay Penske was the chairman and CEO. We recently talked about this because the longtime one of the longtime top executives, I can't remember, at one of the magazines owned by Penske, I can't remember what it's called. He was fired because they published an open letter that was signed by a number of artists who were calling for a ceasefire. And Penske is a Zionist and got very angry that this open letter was published. And so this led to the firing of this guy who had been there for like 20 years. Okay. And then during the strikes, a lot of the tone and the coverage coming from the trades was very pro the major studios, and had a slant that was anti-union, that was anti the strikes. So understanding like who is behind, like who owns these publications, helps you to understand why these angles are presented as such. So it is within their interest. It is within Penske's interest to not let something like the Ryan Coogler deal be presented in this positive way. Okay? Because studios, these major studios, do not want more filmmakers seeing the Ryan Coogler deal and going, you know what? Give me that. When a similar deal was cut with Quentin Tarantino for 2019's Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, the headline from The Hollywood Reporter touted it as a score for the director. And of course, there's the element of racism. In an illuminating comparison, the Times box office report for Once Upon a Time in Hollywood called that film's opening weekend numbers a hit, while Coogler's was met with doubt. But if you assess the numbers, Tarantino's film actually made less money stateside than Coogler's did during opening weekend. Yet it was Sinners that got slapped with an asterisk. But this trend goes beyond Sinners, extending to major entertainment news coverage from other outlets and trades, particularly when the topic could present a major shift in the industry. On the day Sinners was released, Vulture ran a piece detailing why Coogler's deal with Warner Brothers was scaring studio executives. An anonymous source said that Coogler regaining the rights to Sinners after 25 years sets a, quote, very dangerous precedent that could topple the studio system as we know it. It stands to reason that if studio... Also, fuck that noise, okay? That's bullshit. It stands to reason that if studio execs are freaked out about the deal, the trade publications that function partially as an arm of Hollywood's most powerful players, this is what I'm talking about, would cover the indisputable success of Sinners with an apprehensive tone. Oh no, scary. It's the same thing when they're like, we can't pay workers more money. We can't allow them to unionize because it's bad for business. We have to have workers working as much as possible for as low of wages because capitalism. It stands to reason that if studio execs are freaked out about the deal, the trade publications that function 12 years out from Fruitvale Station with 2 major franchises under his belt and a surefire hit of an original film raking in the dough, Coogler's story beckons other young filmmakers to try their hand at shaking up an industry set in its safe, risk-averse white ways. Again, we can see this isn't just about money, it's about power and who has it. And remember, even as diversity has increased in the industry, even when you have more Black people and people of color, queer people behind the camera, in front of the camera, the power in Hollywood is still by and large controlled by white people. Top studio executives, top producers, those who, the money, the financiers, the money behind productions, it is still largely, almost entirely controlled by white people. And that is why they have been the gatekeepers of this industry for as long as it has been around. Looking back over the last couple months, we can track how that unease went from a simmer to a boil. In February, shortly after pop wonderkin Chappell Roan used her Grammy acceptance speech to demand record labels pay their artists a livable wage and give them better health care. Oh my God, God forbid. The Hollywood Reporter published an inflammatory op-ed by a former label exec. The piece talked down to Roan and diminished her requests as childish and unthinking. Ironic for something as petulant as the column reads. The piece garnered an immediate and intense reaction on social media, along with a response from Roan and artists like Charlie XCX and Sabrina Carpenter, matching Roan's contribution to Backline's We Got You campaign. Also, I just saw a piece last week, another fucking op-ed, where the writer of the op-ed was so blinded by their love for Israel and wrote this really disgusting piece chastising kneecap leading a Free Palestine chant, supporting Sharon Osbourne saying to take their visas away. Can't write an op-ed without the up. A similar instance occurred in March when Variety published an article detailing the Snow White remake's rocky road to theaters. We also covered that piece. The piece specifically mentioned the film star Rachel Zegler and her candid pro-Palestine posts on social media, which led to producer Mark Platt, father of adult baby son Jonah Platt, Jonah Platt, flying to New York to meet with Zegler, who stood her ground. My dad had to leave his family. While Zegler and Disney declined to comment for the piece, the article quotes an anonymous insider who blamed the movie's poor box office returns on Zegler. I wonder who the anonymous insider was. We found this anonymous insider who had all the tea. She didn't understand the repercussions of her actions, the insider said. There was, unsurprisingly, no insider quote that examined Zegler's side of the story, and the imbalanced perspective once again caught the eye of social media users when Variety posted an excerpt from the article on X. Did you post this thinking it would make us like her less? One user asked. Another notable comment came from Scream star Melissa Barrera, who pointed out that she too had been criticized by Variety for her shared political views. Coogler, Roan, and Zegler all have three glaring important things in common. They all belong to marginalized communities, they all achieved their success from the ground up, and they all have stood defiant in the face of a machine much larger and more powerful than they are alone. While it's not a full-scale political rebellion, their opposition is nothing to scoff at. These artists want to own their work, be paid a living wage, have access to decent healthcare, and express their views with impunity, as is their right. But those things conflict with the agendas of some entertainment journalism publications. Trades aren't known to be unbiased sources of information, but that doesn't account for all those who may read these pieces and take them at face value. We no longer live in a time when Variety and The Hollywood Reporter are read solely by those within the entertainment industry. Now these pieces are picked up by your mom, dog walker, and bank teller. What if your mom is your dog walker and your bank teller? Their articles affect how the common person spends their money, and the trades have a vested interest in protecting the status quo because that's the safest and whitest way to keep the cash coming in. Also, because they're all owned by Penske Media Corporation. Of course, an original idea from a free thinker makes them shake in their boots. These publications are, after all, how narratives are disseminated into the world of entertainment. Even if the average person didn't see a headline from Variety, Deadline, or The Hollywood Reporter, how these publications write about films and artists affects where the money goes. If a bold original film like Sinners has its success met with doubt, it could result in fewer original ideas being funded. Precisely. Also, here's a good example of that. Sam didn't know anything that was happening with the Rachel Zegler situation. She was only scrolling online. And of course, the Variety article and others that have been so biased and so anti-Zegler was all that she saw. So when I brought it up on the podcast, she was like, oh, wait, yeah, what's the controversy there? It seems like she killed somebody. I was like, she killed Mark Platt. She murdered him viciously. No, as soon as I told Sam what it was about, she was like, damn, I thought she committed like mass murder. And I was like, well, she murdered the, she murdered the concept of don't say anything pro-Palestine when you are working on a major film with Mark Platt, who is a producer of enormous Disney IP. Made him have to leave his poor adult sons alone to fly across the country. Yes. Yeah. Being blamed for murdering the profits of poor little Disney. Just poor little baby Disney stood no chance against the evil 24-year-old Rachel Zegler. Putting an asterisk on something as monumental as Sinners doesn't just denigrate the film to potentially impressionable readers, it serves Hollywood executives looking to make films referred to in board meetings as content, fucking despise that, or watched in the background at home, right? Because the slop economy that we live in. Framing the success of Sinners like this opens the door for companies like Netflix to slip in and make sure that the format they've put billions of dollars into, the home streaming model, where most of the original content is forgotten in a week, isn't dismissed by the viewer. Slanting the dialogue of a major theatrical gangbuster towards hesitation or negativity only feeds the slot machine. This is what I've been saying. Did I write this piece? Who wrote this? Did I write this? Coleman Spildy. Coleman? You're so right. You're so right. It only feeds the slop machine. God damn, that slippity slappity slipper slopper. Gosh, I just can't get enough of the slot machine. And right on cue with Sinners in its second weekend dominating the box office with sold-out screenings is a Deadline article detailing Netflix CEO Ted Sarandis saying the theatrical experience is outmoded. Oh yeah, I saw that. Isn't this interesting how this all happens? How this all goes boom, boom, boom. You have Netflix CEO Ted Sarandis being like, you know, the theater experience, it's outdated. Nobody wants to go to the theaters. They want to sit at home scrolling through the content on Netflix. They just want sloppity slop. And you know what starts with slop? Sarandis. I mean S. Wait, what? What do Sarandis and slop have in common? They both start with S. That's what I was trying to say. Sarandis is quoted in the piece saying, "What is the consumer trying to tell us? That they'd like to watch movies at home. Next time you read an article in a trade that has nothing to do with the quality of the art itself and everything to do with the artist or how they achieve their success, consider, what is the publication trying to tell me?" Precisely. Exactamundo. Consider, what is the publication trying to tell me? What is their, like, who benefits from this? Okay, that's always something that you need to think about when you're reading anything. Who benefits from this? Who is, like, you have to look at the chain of where does this originate from? Okay, who owns this company? That owns this company. Follow the money. That's what we talk about in politics. And examine what angle they're taking and who that benefits. Yeah, definitely nothing to do with inaccessible pricing. We just want more slop. Yeah, I mean, I'm not saying that there aren't issues with the current theater going experience, namely that it is very expensive. And so audiences, because a lot of people, it's like, all right, this is not something that I can do all the time. I'm taking my family to the movies. So do I want to risk it for the biscuit? Or am I going to watch something that is a big studio film, existing IP? It's been thrown in my face over and over again. And that's what I'm going to spend my $25, my $20 on. You know, I'd be willing to pay $20 for a ticket if snacks were cheap. Yeah, if snacks didn't cost you the cost of rent. Sinners on IMAX is $50 to $70 and it's far. Yeah, that's brutal. Like that sucks. That sucks. Yes, or it's because I'm paying for so many subscriptions already, I'll wait at home. Right, because all these streaming platforms have gotten us good, where they've split up all the content, where they've added commercials, they've put ads into everything. So now you have to pay more money if you don't want ads. And it's very common for people to have multiple subscriptions to online platforms, and that shit has gotten more expensive. It used to be more feasible to have Netflix and Hulu and HBO and whatever. And there's so many platforms. And then for the content to just disappear, yeah, you never know when it's going to be yanked. You never know when something's going to be canceled. Thankfully, the 70 millimeter IMAX in NYC is an AMC theater, AMC A-list. Right. Like, I understand that I am lucky. Okay, I live in Los Angeles, the home of movies. I have AMC A-list. I pay like $20 a month. There's so many AMC theaters in the city. So like, I know that it's a lot easier for someone like me to go see movie. And also we get every movie. Like, movie premieres happen in Los Angeles. So we get to see movies, you know, before a lot of people in lots of parts of this country do, if they get to at all. You know, like, a lot of you guys live in areas where there's movie theater deserts, so you got to drive far. There's very limited options. Got to have 5 streaming services so you can spend an hour not finding any good slop to slop down. That's my favorite thing. It's like, all right, let me scroll through Netflix. Okay, fuck that. Let me scroll through Hulu. No, let me go to... Let me just spend a whole hour doing this and then not watch anything because I'm exhausted, because I've given up. Because I'm like, well, there goes the time that I had to watch